You are listening to Novel Nest Audio. In an age of gaslit streets and ticking brass machinery, where knowledge is forbidden and power hides behind ritual and shadow, some doors are not meant to be opened. Some truths demand a price. Welcome to Darkness Beyond the Veil. Episode 1. Under the Crimson Moon, Fate Began. Let the story begin. Chapter 1. Beneath the Scarlet Moon. Pain arrives before thought. Not a warning, an impact. Consciousness snaps into place beneath a crushing pressure, as if something inside the skull is being forced awake against its will. Why does it feel like my head's splitting open? I can't move. What's happening? Zhou Mingrui tries to lift an arm. Nothing responds. The body lies heavy and distant, like a locked room he's trapped inside. Panic surges as the line between sleep and waking refuses to hold. This has to be a dream. It has to be. If I push hard enough, I'll wake up. Zhou Mingrui's thoughts scatter. Fear replaces logic. The pain won't fade, and the silence presses in, thick and suffocating. Then, movement. A shallow breath. Eyes opening. The world is red. A heavy wooden desk stands before Zhou Mingrui, unfamiliar yet vividly real. An open notebook rests at its center, its pages aged and yellowed. Beside it, a dark ink bottle glows faintly. Metal catches the light, cold, deliberate. Wait, that's a gun. Why is there a gun on the desk? Zhou Mingrui scans the room. Pipes run along the walls, feeding into strange mechanical fixtures. Lamps of an old foreign design cast rigid shadows. This place isn't his bedroom. It isn't anywhere he recognizes. Zhou Mingrui lifts his gaze toward the window. The blood-red moon hangs in the night sky, massive and silent. It doesn't glow warmly. It watches. That moon? That's not right. That's not Earth's moon. Zhou Mingrui forces himself upright. Pain lashes back instantly, knocking the breath from his lungs and sending him collapsing into the chair. His heart races as he steadies himself and looks around again. A narrow bed lines the wall. Cabinets hang open, drawers half pulled. A crude cooking area occupies the corner. 2 doors stand closed, and across the room, the cracked mirror. Zhou Mingrui approaches it. That's not my face. The reflection shows a thinner build, sharper features, a scholarly air. Familiar enough to be disturbing, wrong enough to make Zhou Mingrui's stomach twist. Memories begin to surface, uninvited, vivid. A name, Klein Moretti. A modest family scraping by. A fallen father. A mother devoted to a distant goddess, now gone. An older brother carrying responsibility. A younger sister still sheltered from the world. These memories, they're not mine, so why do I remember them? Knowledge follows. Ancient languages, forgotten scripts, rituals meant for stone chambers and whispered prayers. Zhou Mingrui's head throbs as understanding settles in. Zhou Mingrui turns back to the desk. The writing in the open notebook shifts before his eyes, symbols sliding into sense, chaos resolving into meaning. I can read this. I shouldn't be able to, but I can. The message is short, final. It leaves no room for comfort. No! Who would write something like that? What is this place? The air thickens. Faint murmurs seem to brush the edges of hearing. Zhou Mingrui stumbles back, gripping the desk to stay upright. That's when Zhou Mingrui notices the handprint. Dark red, pressed firmly into the wood. Blood? That's blood. Zhou Mingrui looks down. His palm is slick, fingers stained crimson. The pain in his head pulses again, unforgiving. Did I fall? Did I hit my head here? Drawn by instinct, Zhou Mingrui steps toward the mirror once more. The blood-red moonlight provides just enough illumination. The wound at Zhou Mingrui's temple is severe, burned, torn, and far too deep. The kind of injury that shouldn't leave a person standing. I shouldn't be alive. Yet Zhou Mingrui breathes, thinks, stands beneath a blood-colored moon in a room that reeks of secrets and violence. Whatever brought Zhou Mingrui here has already crossed the line between life and death, and this night, this blood-colored night, is only the beginning of the truth waiting to surface. Chapter 2. Assessing the Impossible. The mirror does not lie. Zhou Mingrui stares at the reflection, heart pounding, breath shallow. The face looking back is pale, too pale. The wound at the temple is grotesque, unmistakably lethal. And yet, the eyes are alive. How am I still breathing? Zhou Mingrui turns his head slowly, checking the injury from another angle. The damage is real. The blood is real. Nothing about this should be survivable. Zhou Mingrui presses a hand against his chest. His heart is racing, strong, undeniable. Warmth flows beneath his skin. He bends his knees, squats, then stands again. Alive. Completely, impossibly alive. This doesn't make any sense. Zhou Mingrui steps back from the mirror and glances around the dim room. The red moonlight is too weak to reveal details clearly. Shadows swallow the corners. Zhou Mingrui remembers the gas lamp mounted beside the desk, something Klein Moretti's memories insist should be there. Klein's brother had gone to great lengths to install it. Debt, negotiation, pride swallowed for the sake of study. Zhou Mingrui turns the valve and twists the switch. Nothing. Of course, out of gas. Zhou Mingrui pauses, then walks to the wall-mounted machine with exposed gears. The gas meter. Zhou Mingrui fishes a coin from his pocket. Heavy, worn, stamped with a crowned profile. Local currency. Another confirmation that this world is not his own. The coin drops in. Gears grind. The mechanism hums to life. Back at the lamp, Zhou Mingrui turns the switch again. Light blooms. The room fills with golden illumination. The crimson retreats to the window. For the first time since waking, Zhou Mingrui exhales. Zhou Mingrui steps to the mirror again and examines the wound properly. The bleeding has stopped. Flesh appears to be knitting itself together, slowly, naturally, as if time itself has been persuaded to wait. So, that's part of it. Surviving comes with repairs. Zhou Mingrui lets out a long breath. Whatever the reason, he's alive. Zhou Mingrui opens a drawer, grabs soap and a towel, and steps into the hallway. The corridor is dark. Moonlight pools at the far end like watchful eyes. Zhou Mingrui keeps his steps light, nerves taut. In the shared bathroom, Zhou Mingrui turns on the tap. Water rushes loudly. In his mind, the landlord's voice echoes, stingy, sharp, ever watchful. Relax, I'll be quick. Zhou Mingrui scrubs the blood from his face, then his shirt, again and again. When he looks up, the mirror shows a pale man with a terrible wound, but no longer a walking crime scene. A new worry strikes Zhou Mingrui. If there's this much blood on him, there must be more in the room. Zhou Mingrui returns quickly and cleans every visible stain. Desk, floor, wood grain darkened by crimson. Something glints near the wall. A bullet. So that's how it happened. Zhou Mingrui opens the revolver. 5 live rounds, 1 spent shell. Not an accident. Not a struggle. Where did the gun come from? Why this method? What kind of trouble could push someone this far? Zhou Mingrui sits down, changes shirts, and stares into the lamplight. His thoughts drift to another world. Parents, friends, glowing screens, familiar streets. A life left behind without warning. I need to go back. Zhou Mingrui idly flicks the revolver's cylinder. Click, click, click. Then a memory surfaces. Before all this, before sleep, Zhou Mingrui had tried something foolish. A ritual, meant to improve luck. Old words, simple steps. Nothing happened at the time, or so he thought. If that ritual brought me here, then maybe it can take me back. Zhou Mingrui straightens in his chair. Tomorrow, I will try again. Not because he's certain, but because hope, like luck, is something you chase when everything else is gone. Chapter 3. A Quiet Morning. Once his decision was firmly made, Zhou Mingrui finally felt grounded. The fear that had gripped him earlier retreated into the shadows of his mind. Only then did he dare to examine the fractured memories that did not belong to him. He stood up out of habit and turned off the gas valve. The wall lamp faded slowly, its glow shrinking until darkness claimed the room. Sitting again, he absent-mindedly rotated the revolver's cylinder while pressing his temple, replaying scattered recollections like broken scenes in a silent film. The memories were incomplete, riddled with gaps. He could not determine how the ornate revolver had appeared in Klein's possession, nor could he confirm whether the gunshot had been self-inflicted or something worse. Even the ominous note declaring that everyone would perish, himself included, felt disconnected from context. Entire segments of knowledge were missing. If Klein returned to university in this state, graduation would be impossible, and in only 2 days an interview awaited him at Tingen University's history department. Through the window, he watched the red moon sink below the horizon. Pale gold light spread slowly across the eastern sky. The world outside stirred, unaware of the turmoil within him. A faint noise echoed through the apartment. Footsteps approached his door. Melissa was awake, just as punctual as the memory suggested. For a fleeting moment, he felt the warmth of having a younger sister. But that warmth was borrowed. It belonged to Klein, not him. Unlike her brothers, Melissa had not relied solely on church lessons. The kingdom's basic education law had introduced public schooling, structured to remain neutral among the 7 orthodox deities. For a modest fee, children could attend classes 6 days a week. From childhood, Melissa had been fascinated by mechanical parts, springs, gears, bearings. She dreamed not of embroidery or music, but engines and steam. With Benson's support, she entered Tingen Technical School's Steam and Machinery Department at 15. Meanwhile, Benson's company suffered heavy losses due to turmoil overseas. Employees were dismissed. To preserve his job, Benson endured grueling work and harsh assignments. Klein tried to ease the burden through academic success, yet as a commoner among students raised in privilege, he struggled. Ancient languages familiar to noble children were foreign to him. Through relentless effort, he barely kept pace. These thoughts lingered as Zhou Mingrui reached for the door and remembered the revolver still in his hand, a restricted weapon, and a wound on his head. He shoved the revolver into a drawer and slammed it shut. Melissa asks, "What was that noise?" He steadied himself, picking up a silver vine-leaf pocket watch as a distraction. His fingers brushed his temple. The wound had vanished. Inside the watch's cover rested their father's portrait, a relic from his days as a Royal Army sergeant. Though once treasured, the watch had grown unreliable with age. Melissa had recently claimed to have repaired it. Klein says, "It seems this old thing has stopped ticking again." Melissa stepped forward, expression unreadable. She lifted the crown and turned it deftly. The ticking resumed almost instantly. He stared. Hadn't that mechanism been meant for adjusting time? A cathedral bell rang 6 times, echoing faintly through the morning air. Melissa listened carefully and adjusted the watch to match the chimes. Melissa says, "There, it's working properly now." He smiled politely, accepting the watch. She gave him a look, half judgment, half weary affection, before gathering her toiletries and heading to the communal bathroom. Alone, he snapped the pocket watch open and closed, over and over. A gunshot without a silencer should have echoed through the apartment, yet Melissa, only a wall away, had noticed nothing. Had she slept too deeply, or had the incident been stranger than suicide? Melissa returned and noticed his repetitive clicking. Melissa says, "Klein, bring out the leftover bread and buy fresh loaves today. We need meat and peas. Your interview is soon. I'll prepare a proper stew." She moved the stove forward and added charcoal. Before the water boiled, she carefully retrieved a tin of cheap tea leaves, measuring out only a few as if they were precious. 2 cups of weak tea, 2 slices of rye bread. Though plain, it was filling enough to quiet hunger. After eating, Melissa adjusted her long black hair and looked at him again. Melissa says, "Only 8 pounds of bread. It's too warm to keep more than that, and don't forget the mutton and peas." Klein replies, "I will remember." He calculated the measure by instinct, roughly half a kilogram per pound. The inherited body knew even when his mind hesitated. Melissa packed a portion of bread for lunch. She placed their late mother's worn veil cap upon her head and lifted her handmade school bag. It was not Sunday. She had classes all day. The walk to Tingen Technical School would take nearly 40 minutes. Public carriages were available, but saving coins mattered more than comfort. At the door, she turned back once more. Melissa says, "Don't purchase too much. Benson may return on Sunday, and 8 pounds is enough." Klein answers, "I understand." The word Sunday echoed in his thoughts. 12 months, 365 days, sometimes one more. 7 days in a week, each tied to the 7 Orthodox gods. The door closed. Silence returned to the room. He exhaled slowly, thoughts drifting toward the ritual he believed might improve his fortune. In the growing daylight, he whispered an apology to a world far away. The morning light brightened. The city stirred beyond the walls, and hope, fragile and uncertain, lingered in the still air. Chapter 4. A glimpse into the art of divination. The distant cathedral bells rang through the air, their echoes measured and solemn. 7 chimes drifted into the room before he slowly rose from his chair. The sound lingered in his ears like a reminder that time would not wait. He walked toward the cupboard and withdrew his clothing. A black vest, a fitted suit, trousers tailored close to the legs, a half-top hat resting neatly atop his head. For a fleeting moment, he looked less like a struggling man in a cramped apartment and more like a gentleman from a Victorian stage performance. He muttered under his breath. Zhou Mingrui speaks to himself with dry amusement. "I'm not attending an interview. I'm only stepping out to gather materials for a small ritual." The body's habits were persistent. Anxiety over the coming job interview had etched itself deep into instinct. Whenever his focus wavered, he would automatically dress in his best attire. He exhaled and changed into something more ordinary, a brownish-yellow coat and a rounded felt hat to match. At the bedside, he lifted a cushion and reached into a hidden compartment sewn beneath it. His fingers found a thin, layered pocket concealed within. When he withdrew his hand, a small roll of worn banknotes rested in his palm. There were only 8 notes, faded green, slightly softened by use. This modest sum represented everything his brother had managed to save, including the next few days' living expenses. 2 were worth 5 soldi each, the others a single soldi apiece. In the kingdom of Lowen, currency climbed in tiers. The soldi sought above copper pence, and above the soldi stood the gold pound, paper backed by precious metal. 20 soldi formed a single gold pound. He unfolded one note and inhaled. The faint scent of ink rose from the paper. It was the fragrance of money. Perhaps it was the lingering memories in this body, or perhaps it was simple poverty. Either way, he found himself admiring the craftsmanship of the bill, the stern monarch's face, the delicate watermark, the intricate anti-counterfeit details. He studied it for nearly a minute. Then he forced himself to look away. He separated 2 single solely notes and returned the rest to their hidden lair. The cushion was smoothed carefully, leaving no trace of disturbance. The chosen notes went into the left pocket of his coat. The few remaining copper coins stayed in his trousers. A key slipped into his right pocket. A dark paper bag was taken in hand. He stepped toward the door. But his steps slowed. A faint frown creased his face. Klein's death had been anything but simple. The circumstances were strange, too strange. Would stepping outside invite danger? He returned to his desk and opened a drawer. Inside lay a brass revolver, its metal catching a muted glint of light. Zhou Mingrui lifts the revolver carefully. If nothing else, this should be enough to deter trouble. He had never practiced shooting, but appearance alone could be a shield. A new worry surfaced. Zhou Mingrui thinks quietly. What if I accidentally fire it? He opened the cylinder and rotated it, aligning the empty chamber under the hammer, the same chamber that had once discharged during the supposed suicide. If the trigger were pulled by mistake, nothing would fire. Satisfied, he concealed the weapon in the same pocket as the notes. His fingers rested against the grip. The door opened. The corridor was dim even in daylight. Only a narrow beam of sunlight filtered through a distant window. He descended the stairs and stepped into the open air. The warmth of the sun greeted him. Though it was summer, the northern climate kept the heat restrained. The streets, however, were far from pristine. Filthy water pooled along the stone. Discarded scraps littered the ground. This was common in poorer districts. Voices rose in waves. Vendors shouted about roasted fish, oyster soup, fresh vegetables, and baked goods. Customers argued. Others waved them away impatiently. The street was alive. He moved through the crowd with a slight stoop, pressing down his hat with one hand, while the other remained inside his pocket, gripping both money and revolver. Thieves thrived in crowds like this. So did desperate men. Eventually, the crowd thinned. He straightened his posture. Nearby, an accordionist played a wandering melody. Children in ragged clothing danced freely beside him, their joy unburdened by poverty. A weary woman paused to watch them. For a moment, faint warmth flickered in her otherwise dulled eyes. He turned down another street and stopped before a bakery. The scent of fresh bread tugged at his hunger. Zhou Mingrui addresses the elderly baker with polite familiarity. "Mrs. Smirin, I'd like 8 pounds of rye bread." Wendy Smirin smiles and replies, "Oh, dear Klein, where is your brother? Still away?" Zhou Mingrui answers briefly, "He should be back in a few days." Wendy chuckles lightly. "You've graduated now, a fine history scholar. Soon you'll be earning properly. You shouldn't stay in that cramped apartment forever." He could only manage a strained smile. If he secured a lecturer position, their lives would change drastically. The salary difference between ordinary labor and university employment was enormous, but that future was not yet certain. She packed the bread and held out her hand. "That will be 9 pence. Zhou Mingrui asks reflexively, "Hasn't the price dropped?" Wendy shrugs. "People protested the grain laws. That helped." He did not fully understand the politics behind it. He handed over a note carefully, making sure not to reveal the revolver in his pocket. Change clinked into his trousers. He left with bread in hand. At the nearby square, colorful tents had been raised. Clowns distributed flyers for a circus performance. He wondered if his sister would enjoy such a show. As he stepped closer, a hoarse voice spoke beside him. The painted woman in a pointed hat addresses him directly. "Would you like your fortune told?" Zhou Mingrui responds immediately. "No, thank you." The woman smiles beneath layers of paint. "My tarot readings are remarkably precise." The word struck him. Tarot. The pronunciation was nearly identical to the cards from his former world. Memories surfaced, not of ancient gods, but of Roselle Gusta, a revolutionary figure, inventor, consul, emperor, creator of tarot in this world. Steam engines, card games, naval expeditions, colonial expansion. Assassination. Betrayal. Zhou Mingrui thinks with sudden realization. Could he have been someone like me? Curiosity overcame caution. He looked at the woman again. Zhou Mingrui speaks cautiously. If the price isn't unreasonable, I might try. The woman laughs brightly. You're my first customer today. Consider it complimentary. And under the open sky, amid noise and color and shifting fate, he took a step closer to the unknown. The air felt different, as though something unseen had just begun to move. Chapter 5. The Ceremony of Crimson Fate. Nothing truly valuable comes without a hidden cost. Zhou Mingrui reminded himself of this as he followed the painted woman into the cramped tent. If she tried to sell him anything extra, he would refuse. If she truly possessed skill, she could divine the truth of his impossible arrival. The inside of the tent was nearly pitch black. Thin beams of daylight slipped through the canvas, barely revealing a table covered in tarot cards. The woman in the pointed hat moved gracefully and lit a candle, its flame casting trembling shadows. Zhou Mingrui studied the spread. Familiar images appeared. The magician, the emperor, the hanged man, temperance. A brief thought crossed his mind about Roselle and shared origins, but he dismissed it. The fortune teller gathers the cards and speaks. Shuffle the deck yourself, then cut it. He questions her. I'm the one doing the shuffle? She answers, only you can draw out your own destiny. I simply interpret what appears. He narrows his eyes and asks, this won't involve extra payment, right? She hesitates, then replies, no, it's free. Satisfied, he hides the revolver deeper in his pocket and shuffles confidently. After cutting the deck, he places it before her. She gathers the cards, then pauses. What is your question? He answers immediately. My past, my present, and my future. She tells him to reshuffle now that the question is clear. Suppressing annoyance, he complies. 3 cards are placed. Left, center, right. This represents what has already happened. This reflects your current state, and this suggests what may come. She studies him closely. Which one shall we turn first? He replies. The one that represents the present. She flips the center card. A ragged traveler with a bundle and a dog appears. The number is 0. This is the fool. A beginning, endless potential, or reckless ignorance. The tent flap bursts open. Bright sunlight floods in. Why are you pretending again? Divination is my responsibility. Go back to handling the animals. Another woman stands there, dressed similarly but taller and sharper. I just wanted to try. Sometimes I'm surprisingly accurate. The first woman rushes out. The real fortune teller turns to Zhou Mingrui. Would you like a proper interpretation? He asks directly. Is there a charge? She answers plainly. Yes. He declines and leaves the tent, irritated at having consulted an animal trainer disguised as a seer. At the market, he buys modest mutton and fresh vegetables, beans, cabbage, onions, potatoes. Along with bread, nearly all his coins are gone. He sighs, thinking of Benson's burdens. Back home, he does not rush into the ritual. Instead, he translates the blessing incantation into ancient Fasak and Loan. If one language fails, he will attempt another. He places 4 loaves of rye bread carefully, by the stove corner, near the mirror, atop the cupboard where 2 walls meet, and beside the cluttered desk. Standing at the center, he steadies his breathing. Then he steps counterclockwise in a square. With each step, he chants variations of blessings, invoking celestial authority over heaven and earth. He returns to the center and closes his eyes. Hope battles fear. The air thickens. A whisper coils around him, sometimes distant, sometimes sharp, sometimes alluring, sometimes maddening. Pain drills into his skull, colors explode behind his eyelids. He tries to open his eyes but cannot. His body tightens as if it might tear apart. A bitter thought flashed. Perhaps this was self-inflicted doom. Then, silence. He opens his eyes easily. Gray fog stretches endlessly before him. Crimson stars shimmer within the mist, some vast, others faint and distant. He reaches towards one. At his touch, crimson light erupts like flame. He withdraws in alarm, but brushes another star accidentally. It flares just the same. His awareness scatters. In Backland's royal district, Audrey Hall stands before an aged bronze mirror. Audrey speaks. "Awaken, mirror. In my family's name, reveal your power." She repeats variations. Nothing happens. Audrey speaks softly. So father exaggerated again. He claimed this mirror once belonged to a legendary emperor and held extraordinary power. Before she finishes, crimson light floods the mirror and engulfs her. On the Sonia Sea, Alger Wilson stands steady on a storm-tossed deck, lightning patterns stitched into his robe. Alger speaks. "We still lack the blood required from that spectral shark." A burst of crimson light erupts between his palm and the bottle in his hand, swallowing him whole. Audrey regains awareness within endless fog. Opposite her stands a man, equally bewildered. Another figure, shrouded in gray, remains slightly apart. It is Zhou Mingrui. Audrey speaks. "Sir, where are we?" Alger demands, "What is your intention in bringing us here?" The fog curls around the three of them. Crimson stars pulse faintly in the distance. Silence stretches between strangers who were never meant to meet. The mist drifts without edge. Crimson light flickers like distant embers, and fate quietly shifts. Some doors, once opened, do not close so easily. And in the quiet after revelation, something vast has only just begun to stir. We'll continue this journey in the next episode. This episode is an original retelling inspired by a popular web novel.